Welcome back to Kids Education and Mental Health Network, a nonprofit organization who helps children with emotional, social, and learning disabilities. Today, we are fortunate enough to have the attorney, Natasha Washington, who specializes in special education law. We're going to be asking her questions today and getting information that all parents should have. Natasha, let's start with explaining what a 504 is.
Well, so a 504 is kind of, let's talk about the difference between the 504 and the IEPs. 504s are mostly designed for children who have, who need accommodations in the classroom. And we're talking about maybe extra time on tests or sitting down in a quiet classroom or having questions on a test read to them as opposed to reading it themselves. So it's consists mostly of accommodations, as opposed to when a child has an IEP, they would have both accommodations as well as services and whatever they need to be able to access their curriculum. So the services could be occupational therapy, speech and language, and whatever services the child needs based on the individual child. And so that's a major difference between the two. 504, mostly accommodations.
Okay. Today we have some questions from parents who are interested in getting some information for you. So let me start with, our child is a special education student, recently received a failing grade on a 4-week progress report. Now we are told that the child has been declared ineligible for any athletic programs until the next marking period. Is that legal?
Well, here's the thing with sports and grades, because whether the child has an IEP or 504 or not, when it comes to sports, you kind of want to have the same standard for children, unless a child has an obvious physical disability. So I think what is important for the parent to look at is firstly why the child is getting the failing grade. Because it may be a justified grade, it may not be. And the child may need more services in order to push up the grade. Many schools have their own policies with regards to grades and sports, but I think on the whole, what schools try and do is to make sure that all kids are treated the same when it comes to sports. And a child who doesn't have a disability, if they have a failing grade, they would not be able to compete. And so that's kind of the standard that they want to set for all children, unless a child has an absolute physical disability and it's written in the IEP that the grades would not be affecting their ability to engage in sports.
And before you let a child actually fail a class, it's important as a parent that you stay up on their homework, that you stay in contact with the teacher. I mean, even if you stop by once a week and say, how is my child doing? Is he falling behind?
Absolutely. It's so important for parents to be engaged in their child's education, because you can send your child to school and you cannot just expect that the school needs to bring 100% in order to get your child where they need to be. Child is going home, they have homework, and like you say, as parents, you need to be sure that the homework gets done, and stay vested in your child's education, because as long as you know what's going on with your child and you're in contact with your teacher, I think it makes such a big difference that you are bringing your part as a parent and the school brings their part. That is what is going to make your child successful, because if the school is not bringing their part and the parents bring their part, that's a problem, and vice versa as well. So both parties need to be vested in the child's education, and it's so important for parents to be involved in what's going on at school with the children.
I'd like to say during this time, this is very important, that you have to understand if your child is hurt, if they have fear and they feel frustrated, that all turns into anger. And they don't know how to express themselves, and so it's very important that you work with them, that you help them express themselves, because the teachers just don't have the time. They have 30 kids in a classroom. They don't have the time. So it's very important that you spend your time communicating with your child. Okay, our next question is, last week my child had an IEP meeting to create a new IEP. I disagreed with the IEP. What are my options?
That's a really good question. The first thing that I say to all parents as an attorney is make sure that you document everything with the school district. If it's not in writing, I always say it never happened. So you want to be sure that whatever conversations you are having, that those are reduced to writing. And so the same goes for an IEP. When you're sitting in an IEP and you are disagreeing with the goals that's in the IEP, the services, the placement for your child, it's important that when you go home, you are going to write a note with whatever disagreements you have on that IEP, and then you turn it in. Now, for most parents don't know that there's a checkbox on the IEP document. One that says, I agree with the IEP. Then there's another one that says, I agree with the IEP with the exception of. And if you have any disagreement with an IEP, you need to check the box that says, I agree with the IEP with the exception of. And then I always say to parents, put a note there, with the exception of, see my notation, and add your note, send that to the school district and ask them to add that to the IEP so it becomes part of the IEP document. And in that way, you've documented your disagreement with the IEP, and the school district has to respond to that disagreement. So that's 6 months down the line, when you have another meeting with the school district and you say, oh, but I told you 6 months ago that I'm not happy with the goals. It's very easy for somebody to say, no, you didn't. But if you can pull out that copy of the disagreement that you've put on and attached to the IEP, and of course keep a copy for yourself, then you have a record of that. And that goes for anything. If anything happens in school and you are having a verbal conversation with the teacher, go home in the evening, either if you don't do email, write a letter, saying thank you for the conversation you had with me, and we discussed A, B, and C, and this is what we decided to do. And send that in and keep a copy for yourself. So documentation of all your interaction with school district personnel is so important, because when things start going horribly wrong and your child needs to change placement and the school district doesn't want to, and you come and see me as a special education attorney, I need documentation in order to move forward with the due process hearing. It makes my life so much easier, and I'm not dealing with a he said, she said. Because believe me, when push comes to shove and people's jobs are on the line, it's very easy to say, no, you didn't say that to me.
Yeah.
And then it's the parent having to say, yes, I did. And then a judge has to decide who they're going to believe. But if you have it in writing, that makes my job, a whole lot easier.
And as an advocate, if you're out there, that's the one thing you must do. When you're working with a student, make sure that parents put everything in writing. Because then we are the ones who go to the attorney and say, okay, we have a case for you. First thing Natasha asks is anything in writing? We've got to have it in writing.
Yes. Did you tell the teacher that you have a problem with the placement? Or did you tell the teacher that you didn't like what they did to your child on that particular day? And when you told them, did you put it in writing? And what was their response? And that makes cases so much easier. So I cannot emphasize enough, everything that you do with regards to your child's education, every conversation that you have, every incident that happens. I always say to parents, get yourself a little book, and keep and do it by year.
Yeah.
Keep a book for every year, and just make a notation of the date and the time of incidents that happened, who you had a conversation with, and what happened. You never know what's going to happen. If you don't need it at the end of the year, that's great. Yeah. But if you do, you can whip it out, and it makes a big difference.
Well, a lot of my students, Natasha, I have them send a note into the teacher every morning. Their child's had a bad morning, things are not going well, so the teacher knows what she's got to face for the day, and then she returns it, a note to me back to let me know this is what's going on with the child today, this is the kind of day he had. So at least we have something
Yes,
in writing.
yes,
You know.
and that can be, what we sometimes call a communication books
Yeah.
as well between the school and the parent. So there's a book that your child has in his or her backpack every day. The teacher can write something into it. He or she takes it home at night, and the parent can read, oh, this is what happened today, and make a note for the teacher. Makes life so much easier.
Easier for all of us. Okay, we have a request an independent education evaluation at public expense, stating that we disagree with the found inadequate. The school district evaluation. The director wants us to tell him why and which evaluation we had that we found to be inadequate and which we disagree with. Why should I respond?
So the way you need to, well, the law does not require you to tell the district why you disagree. So you don't have to list the reason why. It's helpful for everybody if you do, but you're not required to do so. What you are required to do is to state the particular assessment you disagree with. So if you disagree with the speech and language assessment or the psychoeducational assessment, that's what you have to state, and the date that the assessment was done, so that everybody knows this is the assessment that you disagree with. And again, that needs to be done in writing. It doesn't help that you're saying to the school principal, oh, I disagree with the speech and language assessment and I want an independent assessment. Okay. Because if nothing happens and 3 months down the line you say, but I told you 3 months ago, and if he says, no, you didn't, well, it has to be in writing. So you've got to put that disagreement in writing, state the assessment that you disagree with, and based on that you are requesting an independent assessment. Now, the fact that you don't have to state why you disagree does not mean that you can just disagree with an assessment for the sake of.
Yeah.
Because when a parent disagrees, a school district only has two choices. They can either pay for the independent assessment, or they can file the due process and ask a judge to find that the assessment they did was valid. Now, if your district decides that they're going to go down the road of a due process, you need to be able to go to court and explain to a judge why you disagree with your assessment. So you need to have a basis, even though you don't have to tell them at that point in time. But if they decide to take the option of a due process, then you have to be able to explain why. And normally sometimes school districts will come with different reactions to a parent's request for an IE. There's only two ways you can react to a parent's request, to a written request for an independent assessment. And that is either you're going to agree to pay for it, or you file a due process. It doesn't need to be any lengthy discussion about why you disagree and let's see if we can resolve this. No, there's only two things they need to do. So as a parent, sometimes I have clients who say, oh, and they called me into a meeting, and then they asked me to sign a document saying that I'm withdrawing my request. Now you've withdrawn your request. Now that timeline starts all over again. So parents need to know that when they request independent assessments, there's only two ways the school district can respond. And you don't have to engage in lengthy conversations and meetings and talks about who did what to whom. No. Either they pay for it or they file for due process. But your disagreement must be in writing.
Okay, I'm going to throw a new one at you. What about a child who does well in school as far as doesn't have any learning disability, but he has oppositional defiant disorder or he has anger disorders, and you ask the school to test him under other and get him assessed, and they refuse to?
Well, so a school district really has an obligation to assess a child only when the child's disability, whatever that is, affects their ability to access their education. So if you have a child who is doing really well and getting, passing grades and not having any failing grades, but still having some issues, that's not a child who would qualify for an IEP. It has to affect the child's ability to access his education. So if a child, for example, has an auditory processing disorder, when they hear what the teacher says, it kind of gets scrambled in their brain. that makes it difficult for them to be able to access their education because they don't understand the full instruction, or they only hear a part of the instruction and then they forget about the other part. And so you can see the way it affects their education by looking at the grades. So if your child has a learning disability and you see that the grades are being affected, and we're not necessarily just talking about grades, we're also talking about social issues as well. You know, they cannot make friends, they're getting into trouble all the time. Those are the kinds of things. And then when you're requesting an assessment from the school district, you again want to put that request in writing to them. And they have to respond. Because once something is in writing, the school district is obligated to respond.
So if you have an opposition or defiant child, and he also has social problems because he's so angry inside that he's not getting along socially, but his grades are okay, they're managing, then the school district could help you?
Yes. Then they would have to do an assessment, because school is not just about academics. It's it's also about the social and emotional aspect of it. So many times you have children who have, for example, Asperger's, smart, doing really well at school, but cannot make friends, do not get invited to parties. They are just so frustrated and miserable. They don't have the social skills to be able to interact at school. That is part of the child's education, and that would require the school district to do an assessment and to provide them services to deal with that particular aspect of it.
Okay, great. Let me do the 504. The local district recently certified my child as a learning disability. In my opinion, my child do not require direct special instructions or support services. What they do require is just a few basic accommodation to be successful in a regular education setting. That would include such accommodations as extended time on testing, extended due dates on written assignments. The school district has refused to create a 504 plan and will not even discuss it with me. They tell me that as my child are eligible for special education, that all service and accommodation must come to them via the IEP. My questions are, is my child entitled to a separate 504 plan?
The problem with the 504 is that parents do not have as many rights as they do with a child with an IEP. So you cannot force a school district to give a child a 504. You can request it, but there's really certain criteria that the child needs to have in order for a school district to give them a 504. Now, if the school is saying your child has a learning disability, then let's make the assumption they've done an assessment. So if they've done an assessment and you as a parent disagree with the assessment and you have a good basis to disagree with it, that's your opportunity to then say to them, look, I disagree with your assessment, and I want to have an independent assessment because I think my child needs a 504 and not an IEP. And so that's the process to start there, rather than to try and force them to give your child a 504, because if they've established that the child has a learning disability, there might be a basis for that. You know, sometimes we as parents, we see our child differently as what teachers at the school see them. We see them do things at home that sometimes teachers don't see them do at school, and so you know there's a very different view from parents and teachers about the very same child. It's hard sometimes for parents to acknowledge that the child has learning disabilities. You know, it's a very hard process for parents. So, you know, if you really want to make sure that what the school district is telling you based on the assessment is correct, then I would say go the route of asking for an independent assessment. You know, then you get an outside, objective person testing your child again and giving you an opinion, and it'll make you feel better as a parent, you know, that this is not just the school district trying to get your child into an IEP. But it should raise a red flag for a parent when the school is saying, I think your child has a learning disability. Then you need to look at, oh, what are his grades? And it's a reality check for a parent. And it's not always a reality that, you know, we want to face as parents, because it's hard to acknowledge that your child has a disability. But with regards to the 504, it's very difficult to force a school to give a child a 504 when they are saying, oh no, he has a learning disability.
So if you get an independent evaluation, does that mean the parents pay for it or the school pays for it?
So when you are asking in writing for an independent evaluation, then the school district will pay for it.
Oh, okay.
If they refuse to pay for it, then they, like I said earlier, the only option for them is to then file for due process and say to a judge, we did this evaluation. We want you to find that it's a valid evaluation, and then they go through the hearing. So if they don't want to do that, then they have to pay for an independent evaluation from an outside private person. So it's not somebody who works for another school district, like school districts, sometimes try to do and say, okay, you don't like our evaluation, we'll get somebody from the neighboring school district to do it. No, that's not the criteria. So that can be funded by the school district.
And parents, as you look at your child, like Natasha said, you see him in one area, the school district sees him in the other. And if a child has emotional problems, they'll do well with 3 or 4 children. But if they've got they've got problems in school with 30 kids to a classroom, that's really overcoming for them. And sometimes they do better in private school. Okay, we're going to have to end today. And I thank you, Natasha, for
Thank you for having me. You're doing such an excellent job.
I also want to say something to all of you. We just lost some wonderful people in our lives, and 8 of them were teachers, and 20 of them were children in Connecticut at Sandy Brook Elementary School. So I want you people to think about this. Mental illness is a serious thing, and these children will never see high school graduation. They'll never see college graduation. They'll never be able to have their own families and see their children. And not only that, their parents have lost their child. They won't be able to see that child grow up and be successful, whether they decide to get married or whether they decide to go in the field that they choose. They will never see that. And most of all, they will never see their grandchildren and be able to share in that. So this happened because of a young man with mental illness made the choice to take other people's lives. He wasn't able to get the mental health help he needed. I'm asking you as parents, grandparents, and someone who works with children and who has raised a mentally ill child, that we need to join together, because it takes the people to tell the government and to tell teachers and parents, you need training. You need to know how to work with these children. You need to give them the love and the response that they need. And when a doctor fills them with 20, 25 medicines like this young man had, or 14 different areas that he'd been put in hospitals, you need to stand up and say, no, there's something else. We need to get him tested. We need to get more help. Don't give up. Write to your congressman, write to your senators, ask them for funding. Get them the help that they need. Most of these kids, some of these kids are being raised not only by parents, but by grandparents who are truly lost, and kinship parents who are lost because they don't have the help they need. So I'm asking you, stand with us and help us. We are here for you. Kids Education is here to give you any help you need. You can call us. We'll support you in any way that we can, even as far as getting you good doctors, trying to help you contact the right people. So with that, I wish you a happy new year, and we hope that you have a wonderful, joyous new year. We'll be looking forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you again, Natasha.
Thank you.
She's been a wonderful help to me. She's taken a few of my cases, and my kids are now doing well. And we'll never be able to thank her enough for all that she does. If you have any questions, please be sure to call the office. and get us, and we will be happy to help you in any way that we can with recommendations for a psychologist, psychiatrist, what we can do to help you with the school. Also, if Natasha can help in any way, and like she said, it's very important, take your notes. Make sure that, you know, carry a little tape recorder with you so that you can remember as to what the teacher said or what the principal said. These are the things that make the cases and make the schools give the kids they help. You know, we have one real quick question I'd like to ask Natasha. Will the school pay for private school? I've had parents ask me that, if the school is letting them.
A lot of that depends on each individual case. It depends on what's been happening with the child for the last 2 years, how far behind they are, the services that they haven't been receiving. So we do free consultations with parents, and we look at the documents, and we can make a, you know, give you an idea of what we think your case could be based on. And then we don't charge parents for our services at the end of the day. So we'd be happy to do consultations with parents.
Okay, thank you.